Proverbs 1 and 5. If somebody have that, read it real quick. And it was talking about how a wise man will listen. And so that's Proverbs 1 and 5. And then Proverbs 11 and 1, I think 11 and 1 or 11 and 5 says that a false balance is an abomination unto God. We have ran into quite a few things about being stuck, can't get over, don't want to relive, don't want to deal with. So I asked him, and he was giving me some insight, so I'm going to ask him to give and share that insight with us. Do we have Proverbs 11 and 1?
Yes.
All right, will you read it, please?
Proverbs 11 and 1, the Lord abhors dishonest scales, but accurate weight are his delight.
What version is that in? Give me the King James Version.
A false balance is an abomination to the Lord.
A-
Just weight is his delight.
A false balance is an abomination. And I use the term, faking it won't make it. And so there's a thing that they use called peeling the onion. And that's not my expertise. Dr. Fleming, I spoke with her. We're still going to do, what was it, cortisol? And I'm going to have her help us understand how just the fluid in our brain or a gene or something in our brain can create we have such a negative approach. And the Bible says in Romans 12, 1 and 2, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, present your body. So our body has a role to play in our development with God. And so he and I, and what was the word? One was in.
Talking about the do and undo?
The do and the undo. And so we had a lot of reviews this morning, and people wanted us to continue, but our goal is, since it is the weekend, we will be back on Tuesday and also Wednesday to continue the conversation. And so for you and I, and he had a wonderful perspective in sharing you have to have a different approach when you deal with things. And sometime in our life, we deal with everything one way. And so I think in one term, and I'm not trying to get in Dr. Fleming's term or in his term, of peeling the onion back. So I wanted him to kind of take the floor and share with us the do and the undo. Because he had a theory of you've got to go out in the desert
Right.
and move the sand,
Right.
but the individual has to do the digging. And so for people to come to God and want salvation, but you also have to turn your entire life around. I can't be a saint on Sunday and then be someone's enemy on Monday. Probably Sunday too. So now help us with the undo, because to me, I think that's a good thing. How do we undo? I can do the do, but how do we undo? Because people do not want to hear the truth, because the truth takes you back to your pain. And until you're ready to deal what caused the issue, and sometimes we're dealing with the residue of the issue, and we have not dug deep enough to find out how the issue was created.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pastor. I appreciate it. Yes, one of the discussions that, as he said, that we had was the doing and undoing. Well, you have to start from the perspective of what was done. So the time that you're born, the doing has already begun. So you've already kind of learned how to do what you do. You respond the way you respond. You act the way you act. That's not just from a external view, but an internal view too. And that's also has to do a lot with the mind. The mind is set up this way. You have what is called your prefrontal cortex, your limbic system, and your hindbrain, and all of them are engaged in different aspects of who you are. So you learn and you have conscious thought, and you're being able to be sociable. You have all that working in the front of your brain, but then you have that very powerful system, which is the limbic system, which is where your emotions are housed, and that's the one that we live on. Majority of us live by how I feel. Cannot tell you how many homicide cases that I done because somebody didn't like the way they feel. So they did what they did, right, to try to eliminate or alleviate that emotional imbalance. Then you have the last part, which is in the hindbrain. It's called Mammalarian Brain, but it's connected to the body. So ideally, before you become a whole person, you have to be able to deal in all three realms. When you're coming up, they are dealing with you in all three realms. They're dealing with how you think, how you feel, and what's going through the body. So you learn a certain aspect. You learn certain responses. People say, I keep getting the same results. You doing the same thing. So you're going to get the same response over and over again. So that's the doing of life. Now what that becomes, it becomes protection, and what we want to do is we want to blame everybody else around me. It's your fault, it's your fault. If you hadn't, then you start to feel better about self. But as we were discussing on the way up here, we were talking about when you look at everybody else around you, what's the common denominator? I am. I'm involved in every situation that I'm complaining about. So what am I doing that is causing me to continue to respond the way that I'm responding? We were talking about some examples with dating relationships, right?
Right.
We're talking about the dating relationships, and that a person goes around and they gets in a date and they keep getting the same results, you know, and then they start to self-profile. Okay. They start to self-profile and say, I know that when I get into this relationship, I'm going to get the same thing. And then they get into it and they don't understand that you are the production of what you're getting. So it's having the ability to be able to look at self and begin to undo. It's not just what's happening in your external world, but where did it all begin? Where did it start? What happened to you? We were talking about children. There are certain things that happen in children's lives. And being able to come back and being able to look at my own life, look at what I had to come through as a child makes a huge difference. How I came up makes a huge difference, because even in the beginning, what happens is that we're all emotion, only the right side of the brain, okay? How many of you know when the full development of the brain is? You're 26 years old. So that means your emotional brain had 26 years of being in charge. So now you ask, why do I always act emotionally towards everything? Well, it had a head start.
Whether it was right or wrong.
Whether it's right or wrong.
And that's what I try to tell parents, that whether you're right or wrong, whether you use bad language, whether you have short patience or short temperament, your child only sees you one way. You are my mother, and as my mother and as my father, you do no wrong. We talked about on the way down about sometimes parents arguing and fussing. In the old day, they would send kids outside, and mom and dad, they would say, this is grown folk time, and grown folk finna have a conversation. And then somebody would whisper and say, but there's going to be some furniture moved up in here today. And so the kid, everything you do, if you get high, you're telling that kid, because they have a thing said behavior is learned before knowledge comes into play. So as a parent, the parent sets the temperament of the child. So if you're short-tempered, you're ill, you don't want to be bothered, then your child thinks what you're doing is perfect. As a grandparent, your child thinks what you're doing is perfect. And then when they get up in society, and society does not allow this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now when someone doesn't agree, he comes and get me because I got mad at you, and because nobody dealt with me, corrected me, or taught me, I murder you. And it's not always a physical murder. I can murder your potential through my attitude. I tear you down to make me feel better about myself, because there's something that happened to me as a child that I don't want to deal with. Abandonment. I asked him a question. Is how we really got on it. I asked him a question about some friends that were going out to eat, and the husband, and he's a brother, so he's cool. A husband would not let his wife go eat with other people, with other women, 4 or 5 women, and he's sitting there. And there's 5 or 6 women at the table. And he's sitting there, he's got to be right there with her. See, we all right, so we ain't got to be worried about nothing. But he's just sitting there the whole time. And then the other one has his wife's phone, and he going through her. And so I asked him, I said, what is wrong with these people? And he said, ownership.
Ownership.
And I said, well, explain it to me. He said, you have to ask them, did they have a pet? Did their pet run away? Did their pet die? Because now you're somebody's pet. Or because you feel abandoned, now you become someone else's pet. And see, for me, and I'm going to give it back to him as a pastor, our job is to get you to Christ and get you salvation, but also we have a responsibility to help you rebuild your life so you can rebuild your children's life. That's why each one of you, aunts that have no kids, uncles that have no kids, you are important because you set that example. Because children believe what they see. And so then when society, like 34 years on the force, and now he tells me to stop. You mean stop, man? Will I tell me what to do? Because you told him 35 times. Then you had to yell at him. So now he's in the presence of authority. See, this is where my heart as a pastor becomes compassionate. You want to live a certain life, you got to make certain money. He helped me. I can't make you go to school. I just got to find another way to let you know school is important. You have to make that decision. That's why I'm so happy for all of the staff that pours in. And so when he was talking, he said, they own them. He said, they lost a dog. I still have the notes in the car. And sometimes as a parent, when you fail, you're not honest with your children. And you're not honest with yourself. And say, I didn't do that right. Because he's told me he's seen so many homicides and bodies torn away apart, what an AK-47 can do to a person. And instead of a person just coming on out of the house, you got to crawl in the window. Because we don't want to deal with our emotions. And as a pastor, I just can't preach you happy. I can't just tell you high five and name it and claim it and God's going to do it for you. I can't tell you that being off the road is okay. God said renew your mind. There's still time and room for all of us to redevelop ourselves. Now you got 14 minutes, brother, to close it out. And I'm going to live for offering for me some new tennis shoes.
So the doing is, and let me touch on that, ownership.
Yes, sir.
My wife and I are married. but I don't own her. She can come, do what she wants. The principle is we are taught to believe because I got this paper, I own her. You cannot own another human being. You can't even own your children, and your children let you know that.
They be in the bathroom, 911.
You can't. We do not own.
Say that louder. We don't own
We
anybody.
don't own anyone. That's impossible to own anyone. Matter of fact, as you were saying, the Bible declares there's only actually two owners, and that's God and the devil. And now you got to pick who you're going to serve. That's the only two masters that you truly have. And you're going to serve one of them. Amen. The Baptist preachers say you got to make the choice. Are you going to the smoking or non-smoking section?
Okay.
Right? You y'all get it now, right? you got to make the choice. But this ownership, this problem with ownership, we can't see things from other people's perspective. Why do you do what you do? And the analogy again about being in the desert. I can take you to the desert, but honey, you got to dig. Because if I do the digging for you, I own the digging. But if you do the digging for you, you own the digging. And then you appreciate what you dug. When you hit that city, I saw that. When you hit that city, you take ownership and you appreciate what you have discovered for self. Now, as we were talking about, things begin to happen for you. You don't pick the people you pick anymore. You don't go where you go anymore. Why? Because now I got knowledge to who I am. And if I got knowledge of who I am, now I understand why I do what I do. But you see, you keep climbing from there, because the next thing is wisdom. What is wisdom? To take the knowledge and apply it. And now my behavior is different. Now that my behavior is different, I have another character. Now that I have a new character, I got another destiny. I don't go where I used to go. I don't say what I used to say. I don't pick who I used to pick. Why? Because the undoing becomes the knowledge. But you have to be willing to visit that time of life when disappointment happened. It's kind of like this. We were talking yesterday. It's like a train, and you're on a train, and life is good. This is the train of life. You're moving along. Suddenly there's a crash called a trauma. A traumatic situation happens to you, and it derails you. Say you're 12 years old. You get off the train. A lot of people died that traumatic experience, say, on that train. And you saw all of this. They come out, they fix the train, they fix the track. And they say, hey, come on, Kenny. Get on board, time to go. I ain't going. It's safe. Come on, get on board. We gotta go. I ain't going. But this is the life of, this is the train of life. We got to keep moving. I ain't going. The conductor gets on the train. Train starts to pull away slowly. You coming? I ain't going. Your behavior becomes intrinsic of a 12-year-old because the train of life has now passed you by. So you respond through what hurt you. You respond through pain. And all it takes for some of us, you don't even have to knock on the door. Just come on the block and I'll start to act out. So the undoing becomes being able to embrace self and go back and look at self, not at the circumstances. Yes, the circumstances count. Yes, he did wrong. Yes, she did wrong. That all applies. But the common denominator, that's me. What is it about me? What happened to me? And as I said when we was coming up here, it's being able to ask the question. If we want to help, being able to say to that person, okay, what does that remind you of? What do you think about when you feel that way? And then they'll say, well, I remember when. There you go. They're doing the digging. And then you say, oh, that's what happened. So they begin to understand what happened to them. And then they have, as we were talking earlier, that aha moment. And then the tears come. I know that what happened to me derailed me, and I just could not get back on the train. Then you get that walk. Knowledge, understanding, wisdom, character, destiny.
Any question? Yes, ma'am. How you going to be a doctor and ask the question? You can't ask no question. Go ahead, doc.
So the digging that you have to do within yourself, the person to ask that question that makes you start reflecting, in my opinion, needs to be someone trained.
But Doc, you said something very important. You said a key word, reflect. That means bounce back, right? That means that what I think, what I feel is non-applicable.
Right. But I'm saying, if I'm talking to my same husband every single day, and he doesn't know the question to ask to help me, then it should be okay to ask someone else for help.
Absolutely.
For like a trained psychologist.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, I totally agree with that. Yes.
I find that in our community, there seems to still be a stigma about seeking some professional help. So I guess my question is, how do we encourage people to ask for help from the psychologists as well?
Can I get you to do me a favor, sis? Can you start back over when you said when you have people at home? See, because people at home always don't have the answer to your,
Right.
and the world needs to hear this because we had all kind of crazy numbers going on. And I appreciate, no, seriously, to help someone.
So I was saying I appreciate the digging or the undoing, and that sometimes we need help, and the people that are right there in our home might not be the one to be able to help us, though it doesn't mean that your relationship with your husband or wife is any less. It just means that sometimes you need someone who's trained. And when I'm recommending therapy to patients, I always say you need a trained ear to listen to you.
Yes. And therapy is not a bad thing.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is, how do we convince people that it's not a bad thing?
I think especially, and I'll start and you chime in, and please keep the mic. I think what has to happen, the biggest time we gather is in three places: the club, the church, and a funeral. And as leaders, we have to give the floor to subject matter experts as yourself, because that's the mass volume of people we have. And as leaders, we have to say, I don't have all the answers.
Right.
This is why I give you every third Sunday. I'm serious. And I shared with him. I said, Dr. Fleming, Dr. Campbell, all these people, I don't have a problem when people come to you because you are expert in that field, or you're so trained in that field, you can hear what I don't hear. I deal with the spiritual. Therapy is not bad. And like I told you, I said, I want to build a staff that when I know it's not spiritual, when someone has a condition, I need more than prayer oil, smacking you all on the forehead. When you're a physician that can say, you need to go see this, get this taken care of tomorrow. And when you have a clinical psychologist that can say, you need to do this, or I want better pay, you're going to have to get a better education. And I always say, every question represents 10,000 people out there. So, is it, and you're right, you're expert, that you have that trained ear. So you can't fix everything in the village. Sometimes you have to come outside the village and have a, as you say, unattached conversation to help a person to see where they are. And my job as a leader is to make sure that you're able to see the clear picture for yourself.
Yes, I agree, Doctor and Pastor, I agree that changing the conversation is the key. And changing the conversation is that we believe that going to therapy is a weakness or something's wrong with me. So if we change the conversation is not to go, something's wrong with you.
Okay.
Make sense? You turn it around and let them know. And that takes a while, because it takes a while before people will actually adhere to it. You may have to say it 5 or 6 times before they really can conceptualize.
No, keep that over there. Follow me now.
Can conceptualize what that is. That not to go is the problem.
Does a lot of this start in the home with children? I know with parents, a lot of times, our ancestors and our parents, a lot of things went on in the home, molestation and a lot of things like that parents kept hid. And then it all grew up in these kids for years and years, and they couldn't deal with it, and it made them start acting out and different things like that. And now as a child, they don't know how to deal with it, and it embeds them as they grow up.
So as an adult, they don't know how to deal with it.
As an adult, then all of this, when they get in relationships or something like this, and all these things come out, which makes it even more difficult for them to get over it.
Bodies in the basement. Come on, tell us that real quick. Bodies in the basement. We're going to have 6 more minutes, so 12:05 we gone. Because he helped me, because, you know, my roots are apostolic Pentecostal holiness. You know, there it is. You go home. You go home. And speaking in tongues don't fix everything. And so he told me about a concept. Yeah, I know. I know. It don't. He told me about a concept, bodies in the basement. And they're dormant. Come on.
Right. There is a concept, it's really called introjects, but because of my experience, I call it body in the basements. As Pastor said, I was with homicide for 19 years, so I saw a lot of times when the bodies in the basements would appear. What a body in the basement is something that happened to you. Some of the worst case scenarios, you were talking about incest and things like that was going on in the family. That's a body in the basement. And it springs up, okay, and it springs out and it leaps on you, right? So what happens in that is that when you have that type of behavior going on, for instance, the person says, you better not tell nobody. Well, I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to hurt your mama, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. Well, that becomes ingrained in your head. And once that's ingrained in the head, that's that body that lives in the basement. Now, when someone comes along, like I said, some of us, you can just come in the neighborhood and we'll react. You don't necessarily have to come knock on the door. What happens then is that body in the basement springs up, and you begin to act out in that same persona, the same feelings that you felt when you were being violated, when you were being subjugated to whatever you were subjugated to by that individual. It's because you really hate self. Because I couldn't do anything about my situation. I couldn't rescue myself out of that situation, and nobody came to help me. And because they didn't come to help me, I turned on me. And I began to hate me. And because I started hating me, I began to act out in anger. Then I go down the street and I find out my girlfriend is going through the same thing. So guess what happens then? It becomes a personal horrification. And we start saying to one another, we gonna fix it. We ain't gonna let this happen to nobody else. We gonna get back at them. What do you got there? You got the next step, violent coaching. Because now we coaching each other to behave, and we keep compounding that situation just over and over and over and over and over until finally it gets buried in the unconscious. But let somebody come on the block and it comes out and it reacts because of what happened then as opposed to what's happening now.
So we will be back on Tuesday. I know somebody's going to start screaming. But this is why I say, and I thank God for you. I pray that God will give us skilled people in the ministry, because behind the pulpit, all your issues can't be resolved. It comes through salvation, and you have to build people that can be a team to help us balance our life. And so I like what he said. Even we have to change the narrative. Why aren't you talking to someone? Because we've talked to people who, as Dr. Fleming has said, who does not have a trained ear, because we think everything is spiritual. Everything is not spiritual. And this is why when I was talking to the producer, Jeff Akers Films, and quite a few people, this is why our numbers go so high and people really reach out, because he said there's two things you can deal with: finances, people stop and listen to you, and people being stuck. And as a I don't know what you want to call it, 21st century kind of pastor, I know it's going to take more than spitting and yelling in the mic. It's going to take sit-down conversations, and not long situations, but enough to make you think and get the wheels turning. Because like I said to you last Sunday, you have a seed. Your seed can't grow if you poison it. You're gifted. Every one of you. And what I'm trying to help you do as a pastor is peel back that onion and take those dead leaves off of you. And I understand as a leader, I can't do it by myself. So I thank God for all of you. Want to take a quick shout out and thank God for the person. We've had 2 people this month to bring food and bring things to help with the Greenwood Food Bank. So I say to you all, you didn't leave a name, you didn't tell us who you were, but my prayers and God's blessings said he will bless you. And someone sent a card, said you are making an impact. And so I want you all to know, without you, none of this is possible. And I thank God for you. So I'm going to let you go home 1 minute early. It's 12:05. Let us stand. Yeah. And get your